What up, Wizards? It's Dev. Got a big one for you today because the first weekend of Cowboy Standard, she's in the books, boy. And don't worry if there's new decks or not. This is probably the wildest crop of new decks that we've done since we started doing this series. It would seem that once we left the cozy confines of MTGO leagues and challenges and stuff like that and hit the mean streets of Thunder Junction out here in the real world, baby, that's where the jank came out. So there's a lot of cool stuff to look at today. But I do have a bit of a disclaimer before we move on to the really janky stuff. First of all, we only had the results from one pretty large scale tournament so far over the weekend, and it's a Japanese tournament with over 128 players. That's a whole lot of people, and a lot of them are on some pretty traditional stuff that we've seen in Standard before. So again, second part of the quick disclaimer, first and second place were both Better Mtg, and third place was Mono Red. And Mono Red doesn't play a whole lot of brand new cards. This Better Mtg plays like a Dust Animus and also a Harvester of Misery in the sideboard, so not a whole lot of technology there. There's not even new lands. But when it comes to the Better Mtg deck that won the entire tournament, well, this one's got some new stuff in it. 4 whole copies of Duelist of the Mind. So I guess that's cool. There's also Pest Control in the sideboard, Rest in Peace is in the sideboard, and I guess even, Concealed Courtyard? Yeah, is in the mana base. So the Esper deck with the most new cards is the one that won, so I should point that out. But we're not looking at Esper Midrange today. That's not what we're about. What we are going to look at in this video, I promise, is all decks that A, had a winning record on the day, and B, even better, all decks that made the top 16 or better. That's great. And C, the first deck we're going to look at is Azorius Control. Boo, I know, but don't worry, don't click away. It's kind of our honorable mention for the day, and it's not actually Azorius Control at all. It's just cleverly named that by Mtg over here, who actually went 7-2 and got 4th place in the entire tournament. That's great. In case you haven't seen this deck quite yet, I have been talking about like a Jeskai Artifacts deck a little bit here and there over the last week on the channel, and a couple of people have asked me, more than a couple of you have asked me, like, what's up with this deck? You got a list? And we just don't have proof of concept for it yet, is what I kept having to say. But now we finally do. This is kind of the thing I've been talking about, but they have cut red from the deck, I think smartly. Things are a lot more concentrated, and this is much more of a control-y build than I've been seeing. The Jeskai decks all play like, Urbrass Forge and Legion Extruder and cards that are like, get them, a little bit more mid-rangey. But this one takes its time. It actually has like ways to interact with the opponent a lot more, and I like that about it. Altogether, first of all, I should let you know that all the links to new card images are broken on Melee for some reason, but I'm not going to badmouth Melee. They're a hell of a site. I don't know what I would do without them, but still, I'm going to put the images on screen. If you haven't seen Synthesizer yet, it's a 3-mana artifact. Whenever you play 3-mana artifacts, you get a construct. That's gross. In real practice, what this actually means is that on turn 5, you'll have like 4 12-12 guys. I'm not even like exaggerating that much, man. The deck does sick stuff really fast if it can actually like stick and get a turn in with Synthesizer. So what all are we doing in this version of the deck? Again, a little bit more control-y, but not all the way. Just 2 main deck counters, 3 steps ahead. This is another one that's seeing an awful lot of play over the weekend in a bunch of different decks. Not just Azorius Control like traditional stuff, but again, less traditional stuff like this, and you even see it in Bant Toxic sometimes. It's a really important new card. Aside from that, Get Lost and Destroy Evil are some of the only other real like removal in the whole deck. But we've also got Assimilation Aegis to help remove stuff. This is the new O-Ring. That also puts a Construct into play. Spring-Loaded Saw Blades does not put a Construct into play, but what it does do is kill a guy at instant speed. Most guys at instant speed. Fabrication Foundry will help you make sure that you keep like Synthesizer on the table if it's in your graveyard, and also ramp you into important stuff. Braided Net is kind of a removal piece to get you a Construct. Unstable Glitbridge is a sweeper effect. Mightstone and Weakstone is, amazing ramp that also draws cards or is a removal spell. So again, we interact a lot more in this build than I have been seeing in other builds so far. So really, really cool sort of build from Mtg here, and congratulations on 4th place. Weird that this is, our honorable mention for like best new decks of the week. It's probably the actual best competitive new deck of the week, but altogether really, really cool deck to start the season, and a hell of a debut for a brand new deck nobody's ever really seen before. One of the bigger tournaments that we'll see in the opening days of the season. And next I want to look at Grisha Midrange over here. 5-3 by Upper over here. 5-3 is not a bad record at all, and there is some stuff in here that like you would totally expect to see, but there's some new stuff too, and the new stuff is really, really cool. All 4 copies of Marchesa in here, and again, all the links to new stuff is broken. Why are they doing that? I'm not going to say it again. I'm just going to put the images on screen and stop complaining. But yeah, Marchesa is kind of incredible when it comes to card advantage. If you can consistently commit crimes, and if you haven't noticed, like most of the cards in the deck do that. So if you can consistently commit crimes, you're just getting like a ridiculous amount of card advantage over your opponent. It's also got Magda, the Horde Master. I don't know why I keep hovering on new cards. It's got Magda, the Horde Master in here. So makes treasures pretty sweet. You can sacrifice treasures to get like the big 4/4 Scorpion Dragon guy. That's awesome. So, and you've got other ways of making treasures in this deck besides just Magda's as well. You've got the Belligerent in here, kind of sleeper card. I think it was even on my sleeper list from Ixalan, right? This is neat. If you haven't seen it in a while, 4 mana, 5/5 vehicle, cruise for 3, and when it attacks, you get a treasure token. So there's that right there. But you can also look at the top card of your library anytime. You may play lands and cast spells from the top of your library. It's really sweet. All this until end of turn. So again, a lot of card advantage on this, and some ramp too. Your Magda cares about the treasures. So really, really interesting deck. Kind of a Grixis Crimes thing that's still, again, no card quality sacrifice. You get Blood Tithe Harvester, Liliana of the Veil, that commits a crime. Deep Cavern Bat, that commits a crime. The deck is so heavy on card quality, it had to go down to 3 Deep Cavern Bat. When's the last time you saw that? Graveyard Trespasser commits a crime for free every turn, right? Aklazotz is just a really freaking good Magic card. That's awesome. So, like, go for the throat, Voltage Surge, make disappear, Spell Pierce, Torch the Tower. These are all like, things that target stuff. So just a Grixis Marchesa deck that uses the Belligerent. Like, yeah, dude, let's go. It's all Magda. Like, yeah, that's an awesome new deck. Grixis is finally back on the menu, and I'm actually pretty happy about that. But next, let's look at one I'm pretty excited about. This is 5 Color Legends by Akira Shibata, 5 and 2, and good enough for 10th place. Just outside of the top 8 for this brand new deck that's been making some rumblings on MTGO and challenges and leagues and stuff so far this week. But here it is in a real big boy tournament, put its pants on and almost got top 8, which is really saying something. 5 and 2 is a great record. But what's this deck doing? In case you haven't seen it, I've talked about it a good bit this week on like Twitter and even in videos, but I don't think that I've really explained it to mine or definitely yours satisfaction. So what are we actually doing in terms of like the infinite loops here? Well, first of all, you've got 2 copies of Honest Rutstein, and the deck is not link broken. I'll just put it on screen. The deck is not super in on the loop, because it only plays 2 Honest Rutstein, and you need 2 Honest Rutstein to do the infinite loop. But in case you're super interested in it, and you might be, you play Herald of Invasion, a Rona, on whatever turn you do that. This is a 2 mana thing. It's a 1/3. Whenever you cast a legendary, you untap it. So the thing about it is, though, you tap it to draw a card and then discard a card. But you can also tap it for mana, just like all your other legends. If you have a Relic of Legends out, this is the 3 mana rock. You tap for a mana of any color. Tap an untapped legendary you control to add a mana of any color. So what you want to do is have an Honest Rutstein on the table and play an Honest Rutstein. You also have to have a Rona and a Relic on the table, just to be clear. So at that point, the Honest Rutsteins see each other, they legend rule, and one of them leaves the battlefield. But you still have an enter the battlefield trigger on the table, so Honest Rutstein can pick up the Honest Rutstein that just went to the graveyard from the legend rule and put it back into your hand. At that point, Honest Rutstein's on the table. That means that its passive ability is going on. It only costs you 2 mana to cast an Honest Rutstein. So you can use Relic of Legends' ability to tap down both Rona, which is now untapped because you just cast a legendary spell. So you can tap down your Rona and your fresh Honest Rutstein, because this card doesn't care about summoning sickness the way the ability is worded. So you tap down your Rona and your fresh Rutstein for 2 mana, and you play the Rutstein that this Rutstein got back. Right. Well, they see each other. They legend rule again, right? So I guess one of them goes to the graveyard, and the enter the battlefield trigger goes off, and you get the one that just went to the graveyard back. And do you see the loop yet? Right. You're just going to tap down the Rona and the Honest Rutstein again and play the Rutstein that you got back from your graveyard. They legend rule again, and then this goes on and on and on, my friend. The song that never ends. So neat loop. How do you exploit it? I have got a Soul Tie build of this deck right now that plays Tiny Bones, joins up, and that, whenever a legendary creature comes into play, does a damage, it mills a card, right, or they lose a life, they mill a card. So you basically kill in 2 ways with that, and it only costs 1 mana to cost Tiny Bones joins up. Why aren't more people doing this one neat trick? But what a lot of people are doing, that I see on like MTGO, is they're playing Annie joins up. This is also a broken link to an image, but it's just, I have to test it. But yeah, what they're doing is this is going to double up like any trigger for a legendary creature, and it's also easy enough to play. You'll have plenty of mana in this deck once you have Relic of Legends out and a couple of creatures. So you play Annie Joins Up, you blow something up or whatever. And then you have Panharmonicon for legendary abilities. That means Rona's abilities are going to go off twice. That means that in between each of her abilities going off, you can get extra mana off of Relic of Legends and effectively get like infinite mana depending on what you're doing. Inti's triggers go off twice. Slowgurk's triggers all go off twice, which is probably key to the deck. In the Sultai version, I've been messing around with Slowgurk loops are the way the deck actually wins, you know? Like, you get a Slowgurk out, it gets some counters on it because you channel some lands that go into graveyard other ways. Slowgurk gets big, you return it to your hand, you get all your channel lands back, but you still have legends on the table. So all your channel lands don't cost anything to channel. You know, so you play your Slowgurk again, you start channeling lands, throw that thing back in your hand with a Tara, Takenuma to get the best creature in my deck, and blah, blah, blah. And the whole time the Slowgurk is growing. If it ever gets targeted, just put it back in your hand and get all your channel lands back. These loops with channel lands and Slowgurk are the actual key to this deck working, which is probably why it's not like all in on the combo or anything. But yeah, Slowgurk, the leaves a battlefield trigger will happen twice, which is really gross. The land card put into your graveyard trigger will happen twice. So at one point you can just like Otarawa them like 7 times in the same turn to just get their entire board off the table because you have that much mana being made through the combo because Rona is tapping for extra mana every time. It just gets gross. So you just like get rid of their whole team with Otarawa, or you get all, again, the best creatures in your deck. You get like Urtai resurrected with Takenuma. You make sure you find it, you blow away their best blocker and all that. And you just get him with Slowgurk, which has trample anyway. It gets gross. Titania's in here as well. Usually, and I don't think this one is playing it. No, yeah, usually you don't see the Titania land in here. And I definitely see why, although it would take forever to explain why. It's just the deck list is really tight, especially in terms of the lands. Like already, like this deck did add a 29th land. Usually you see 28 in these lists, but no, we have added a 29th and it still didn't add the Titania land. It's just not really a way that the deck wants to win or is usually in a position to win by melding Titania. It's just not really where you want to be. There's other ways to win, and usually you're just concentrating on Slowgurk loops. So you don't really need the Titania land. It just kind of slows you down, and who cares? So what you really want Titania for is a large-ish creature that you can double trigger and gain 4 life every time you channel a land, and you just can't lose. You just can't. Full hearts can't lose, right? So you also get double triggers off Red Steam, which might be important. Urtai Resurrected double triggering is ridiculous, right? And then Shieldred is ridiculous double triggering. Tiny Bones double triggering if it gets in is crazy. Bonnie Paul Clear Cutter double triggering getting in when it's crazy is just a ridiculous deck with Annie Joins Up on the table. But I would much rather just like infinite combo my opponent and killed him a lot more quickly with Tiny Bones Joins Up myself. But this is still a very, very sweet deck that you definitely need to know about. It's been on MTGO challenges getting like quiet 23rd place, quiet 17th place, but now we see it knocking on the door of the top 8, and whoever figures out like the proper build of this deck is going to go somewhere with it. It's actually really sweet. Just reminds me of the Slowgurk deck from last season that just like bodies control decks. This deck still does that even without an infinite combo, and its Slowgurk is a hell of a drug. So man, I'm telling you, there is a build of this that is top tier. Let's move on to the final deck of the day. This, I believe, is just out. I want to say this one is just outside the top 16, but it might be literally number 16. But the thing is, this deck also went 5-2. This deck actually has a better record than a lot of the other decks like that are definitely in the top 16 for sure. So I wanted to point this one out, but as like the last deck we look at. So if you're still here, you get to see a cool deck. And I just played against this deck on Arena like earlier today, and I was like, oh, cool. Okay, I actually get to see how this works, because I was having a hard time seeing like what exactly is going on with this deck. But now I see fully. Now what we're doing in this deck is we're playing things like, No More Lies for a little bit of removal, and that's where in temporary lockdown. But that's kind of where it stops. Everything else is pure synergy. This is a wild, like, infinite combo sort of Reanimator deck. So I've got to play this thing. So it's got Abuelo's Awakening, one of my sleepers if I remember correctly, for Ixalan, and it looks like it's finally found its home. This is a 4-mana thing you can also pump X mana into. Return an artifact or non-aura enchantment from your graveyard to the battlefield with X additional +1/+1 counters. It's a 1/1 spirit with flying in addition to its other types. So, what are we returning? We're returning Rakdos Joins Up. Again, link broken here, but this, when it enters the battlefield, you're going to, reanimate a creature from your graveyard. And then whenever a legendary creature that you control dies, any target, I think it is, any target, yeah, maybe it's just your opponent, but either way, you're going to fling it to the face regardless, takes damage equal to that creature's power. So, how does this actually work? We have Hulking Metamorph in this deck. Let's get a good look at this. Hulking Metamorph states that you may have it enter the battlefield as a copy of an artifact or creature you control, except it's an artifact in addition to its other types. Power and toughness are equal to Hulking Metamorph's power and toughness. That's actually very important because it's going to be a 7/7. That means that, here's the thing. If we Abuelo's Awakening, a Rakdos Joins Up onto the table, it is now a 1/1 creature. And when it comes into play, because it came into play with Abuelo's Awakening, right? We reanimated the Rakdos Joins Up, which now that it's into play gets to reanimate a creature. So we reanimate the Hulking Metamorph as a Rakdos Joins Up. That makes it a legendary 9/9 guy that also, since it's a Rakdos Joins Up, gets to bring a creature back from the graveyard. Now here's the thing. They're going to see each other as legendary guy. Hulking Metamorph is a legendary guy. Rakdos Joins Up is a legendary guy. They see each other and they're like, this town ain't big enough. So one of them's got to go. So you sacrifice the Hulking Metamorph in this case, and it goes back to the graveyard and becomes a Hulking Metamorph. Well, here's the thing. That Rakdos Joins Up ability that went on the stack when Hulking Metamorph came into play in the first place is still on the stack. So you can use that to bring back Hulking Metamorph, which will become a copy of Rakdos Joins Up. Now, this deck goes infinite, but it only has to hit you like 2 or 3 times in order to kill you, which is really, really cool. And it's got a bunch of stuff to facilitate the combo and make sure that it gets all the proper stuff into its graveyard at the right time. It's got Otherworldly Gaze in here. You know what that does by now? It puts like 6 cards in your yard for 3 mana. Faithful Mending is going to put, 4 cards in your yard for a total of 5 total mana. But at the same time, it's instant speed. You gain 2, you draw 2, you discard 2, and you flash it back for 3. That's a lot of value. That's a lot of cards in your yard at the same time, right? Chart a Course is a way to just draw cards if you attacked or whatever. But mostly we want to draw 2 for 2 mana and then discard a card. Hopefully it's one of these like reanimation targets. Also, Picklock Prankster can get stuff into the yard and just be a creature itself. That's kind of cool. Founding the Third Path can cast a Abuelo's Awakening while also milling us. Like, there's obviously a lot of stuff going on in this deck. This actually feels a little bit like the Azorius Reanimator deck that was like a helping hand deck from last season, but instead it's plugged in this ridiculous like win the game on the spot combo. Go forth and conquer with some brand new like funky janky stuff too. Like, this is again not boring stuff, brand new cool stuff to do in Standard, man. Like, the Cowboy set didn't just bring like neat stuff or competitive stuff. It brought a lot of cool stuff too, but competitive stuff. That Marchesa deck looks great. That Synthesizer deck looks great. And who knows how this will affect things like going into the Pro Tour and if pros start taking these decks more seriously and testing them or what's going on. So, but great first sort of weekend of the season. And again, I might have more to report on as the days go on, but very soon we're going to have a new Patreon poll. Plus I spent $5 on the Cowboys set and a bunch of other videos coming up. Second deck tech of the season, Pro Tour coverage, sub to the sandwich if you haven't done it yet. And of course, like the video to put it in more recommended feeds. If you want to help out around here, it's just $1 a month to do it on patreon.com. And again, you can vote on what decks we do. Every time we do deck techs and new videos and stuff like that. So $1 a month supports the channel in just an amazing way, more than you think. So if you consider doing that, I really appreciate it. Aside from that, you can check me out on Twitch. We stream on Thursdays most weeks, usually around 8 to 8:30, maybe 9 p.m. Eastern, somewhere in there. So follow if you're interested in watching us play some of this jank. And I am Dunsky for this one ski. Pretty sure that's all Ski Kowalski. So I will catch you cats later. I'm Deb from The Place. Thanks for watching, Wizards. Spread love and be kind.